All right, John chapter 6. Here comes another sign. After these things, Jesus went away to the other side of the Sea of Galilee, or Tiberias. And a great multitude was following him because they were seeing the signs in which he was performing on those who were sick. So the reason his popularity grew was because of the healings, which kind of makes sense. If you had very limited health care, and even today now, healings are very attractive. But the majority of the people were following Jesus for, I would say, selfish motives, not the purest of motives. They always wanted more and more signs. They always wanted more and more healings. And he was willing to heal. And he healed far more than was ever recorded. But this was the fuel for the people. Verse 3, Jesus went to the mountain, and there he sat down with his disciples. Now the Passover of the feast of the Jews was at hand. So very similar. This is the feeding of the 5,000. This is another year. Another year has passed. Another Passover has come. And he didn't go to Jerusalem then. He actually went and fed 5,000 people who also did not go to the Passover. Verse 5. Jesus therefore, lifting up his eyes and seeing the great multitude were coming to him, said to Philip, "Where can we buy food for these people to eat?" So he's testing his disciples who are there with him. And this he was saying, testing them, for he himself knew what he was intending to do. Philip answered and said, 200 denarii worth of bread is not sufficient for them, for everybody to receive even a little. So even 200 days' wages is not going to be enough. Now one of the disciples, Andrew, who was the very first disciple to follow Jesus, he came from John the Baptist. This is Simon Peter's brother. One of the disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, said to him, "Well, there's a lad with 5 barley loaves and 2 fish, but what are these among so many?" So he didn't have the most faith, but he had more faith than anybody else, and said, "Well, we have a sack lunch here." Jesus said, "Have the people sit down." Now there was much grass in that place. So the men sat down in number about 5,000. We call this the feeding of the 5,000, but if there's 5,000 men, there's also probably 5,000 women. And if there's 5,000 women, there's probably some children as well. So we're looking at maybe 15,000. It's more than 5,000 mouths. 5,000 men were counted, and so there's more mouths than that. Verse 11, Jesus therefore took the loaves and having gave thanks, he distributed to those who were seated. Likewise also of the fish as much as they wanted. And when they were filled, he said to the disciples, "Gather up the leftover fragments, that nothing may be lost." So they gathered them up and filled 12 baskets with fragments from the 5 barley loaves which were left over by those who had been eaten. When therefore the people saw this sign which he had performed, they said, this is of a true the prophet who has come into the world. So this is sign number 4, the feeding of the 5,000. And one of the powers that's being mentioned here that we should think about is quantity. When we give God our little, and we give it to him, he has the ability to make something great and something huge out of it. And we see this person giving up their sack lunch, 5 pieces of bread and 2 fish. We see the little bit of faith of Andrew and the lack of faith of the other disciples. And with that, with our little and plus God equals unimaginable things. But when they collect the leftovers, this is interesting. This is important to note. Jesus does this miracle 2 times. He does it once for the Jewish people, and he does it another time for Gentile people. And he does it at different areas on the Sea of Galilee. The west side of the Sea of Galilee was Jewish. The east side was Gentile. And he'll repeat this miracle for each half. When they collect the leftovers, they have 12. Now, if you think back to the Jewish history, 7 is kind of important. 12 is also important because the 12 tribes of Israel, the sons of Jacob. And so they were used to 12 being a really important number for them. And when they collected all the leftovers, they saw that they had 12. And when we see this miracle again, I don't think it appears in the book of John, but it's the feeding of the 4,000, and I think they have 7 baskets of leftovers. Well, all this is saying exactly the same thing. Jesus is more than enough for the 12 tribes of Israel, the Jewish people, all of the Jewish people. 12 baskets full. He's more than enough for every single one of them in that tribe. And when this happens for the Gentile nations, who had 7 nations, he says the same thing. I am more than enough for you. So, now this moves right into the very next sign that John is going to give to these people in hopes that they would believe. Verse 15. Jesus therefore perceiving that they were intending to come and take him by force to make him king. You can see their motive, right? What did they want? They wanted a Messiah to be their king and to drive out Rome and to finally be free of all their oppression. And those people were willing to do it by force. And who better to elect than Jesus? But Jesus said, that's not why I came. I didn't come here for political reasons. I came here for heart reasons. And that heart kingdom, that kingdom has withstood every other earthly kingdom because 2,000 years from then until now, 2022, that kingdom is still going on. Okay, so verse 15. Withdrawing again to the mountain to be by himself. So this is what he does. He has some time of ministry with the people. He withdraws. We can see him taking time to be with just him and the Father, praying and being in communion with God the Father. Now, when the evening had come, his disciples went down to the sea. And after getting into a boat, they started across the sea to Capernaum. And it had already become dark, and Jesus had not yet come to them. So they went by themselves in the evening to cross the Sea of Galilee. The sea began to be stirred up because of the strong wind was blowing. And when therefore they had rowed about 3 or 4 miles, they beheld Jesus walking on the sea, drawing near to the boat, and they were frightened. So they saw some figure walking on water as they've been rowing for a long ways to try to get through this storm. He said to them, "It is I, do not be afraid." They were willing therefore to receive him into the boat, and immediately the boat was at the land in which they were going. So you have a couple different miracles. You have Jesus walking on water, and probably the sea dying down after this event, and the boat being transported from the middle of the lake to the shore. And this more and more is showing Jesus' power over things that the disciples needed to know. He has the ability to take anything we give him and turn it into good, quality and quantity. And now he has the power over nature, even the winds and the storms. So when we read the book of John, we think, well, yeah, that's obvious. I know who this character is. I know that this is Jesus. I know that this is God in the flesh. Yeah, I would assume an all-powerful God could do all these things that these miracles are presenting. But picture yourself the disciples who are hoping for a Messiah, and their hopes are not 100% noble. They want a king, they want a new leader, they want to kick out the Romans. But now, miracle after miracle, they're starting to realize exactly who this person is. Another piece of information is given to him. Oh, I thought he was just a great teacher. He's also a prophet. He's also a miracle worker. Wow, he can turn water into wine. He can even do this to nature, right? Each miracle is progressing, going up. And especially in the book of John, that's the way it's presented. And the miracle that it's going to is the raising of Lazarus. And then the last miracle is his own resurrection, right? It's ramping up. And so all these miracles are bricks that are being laid to prove you can trust and believe in this man. that he is who he says he is. He is the Messiah. Verse 22. The next day the multitude stood on the other side of the sea, saw that there was no other small boat there except one, and that Jesus did not enter with his disciple into the boat, but that his disciples had gone away alone. There came other small boats from Tiberias near to the place where they had ate the bread after the Lord had given thanks. When the multitudes therefore saw that Jesus was not there, nor his disciples, they themselves got into small boats and came to Capernaum seeking Jesus. And when they have found him on the other side of the sea, they said to him, Rabbi, when did you get here? So he provided the feeding of the 5,000, stepped away for a bit, left on the other side of the boat or other side of the sea, and the crowd was wondering, how did you get here? Jesus answered them and said, Truly, truly, I say to you, you seek me not because you saw signs, that you understood the nature and the power behind what I was doing, but because you ate your loaves and were filled. You got a free meal out of this. You got free health care out of this. That's why you're following me. Do not work for the food which perishes, but for the food which endures to everlasting life. So Jesus often does this. He uses something they're familiar with, something recent. And so he uses the miracle of the fishes and the loaves to illustrate who he actually is. Verse 27, but the food which endures to everlasting life, which the Son of Man shall give to you, for on him the Father, even God, has set his seal. They said therefore to him, what shall we do that we may work the works of God? Okay, that's a good enough question. What should we do to do this works? What shall we do to do the works? Jesus answered and said to them, this is the work of God, that you believe in him whom he has sent. The work, the thing that we're supposed to do is believe. Not do good deeds and try to have our good outweigh our bad, but for us to have trust, living active trust in God. That is the work, that we should believe in him whom he has sent. Verse 30. They said therefore to him, what then do you do for a sign, that we may see and believe you? What work do you perform? Really, you're asking for another sign after you have just been fed and the feeding the 5,000. Now, yes, not all 15,000 that were there knew exactly how this miracle occurred. They heard him teach. They liked that. Some people probably got healed. They got a free meal out of it. They don't know where the food came from. The disciples do, and probably a few close people did. But now they're asking for another sign and another sign. And you can understand that Jesus is getting a little upset about this. Verse 31, our fathers, this is what they bring up, our fathers ate manna in the wilderness, as it is written, he has given them bread out of heaven to eat. Okay, that's what they bring up. Well, in the Old Testament, God provided manna for the people. What are you going to do, Jesus? And this is how he answers. Jesus therefore said to them, truly, truly, I say to you, it is not Moses who has given you bread out of heaven, but my Father who gives the true bread out of heaven. That's Jesus. For the bread of God is that which comes down out of heaven and gives life to the world. That's Jesus. Jesus said therefore to him, they said therefore to him, Lord, evermore give us this bread. It's like, I've been trying to give you this bread, and you're just not listening and paying attention. Now, in the book of John, we have lots of I am statements. There's 7 of them. Lots of 7s in the book of John. 7 signs, 7 I am statements. Maybe, if we counted up, 7 witnesses to him. And this is the very first I am statement. It's, I am the bread of life. And the reason he says this is because their topic was about bread, and he's trying to use that illustration to explain who he is. Jesus said to them, I am the bread of life. He who comes to me shall not hunger, and he who believes in me shall never thirst. But I say to you that you have seen me, yet you do not believe. All that the Father has given me shall come to me, and the one who comes to me I shall certainly not cast out. For I have come down from heaven, not to do my own will, but the will of him who has sent me. And this is the will of him who has sent me, that all that he has given to me I will lose nothing, but raise it up on the last day. For this is the will of the Father, that everybody who beholds the Son and believes in him may have eternal life, and that I myself will raise him up on the last days. The Jews therefore were grumbling about him because he said, I am the bread that comes down out of heaven. Now, recognize the people who were there there's some good people there, maybe for the wrong motives, for free healthcare and free food, but there's also the enemies of Jesus were also there listening. So imagine talking to a crowd and you're always going to have a small percentage that are there for the wrong reason, that are going to get upset at you, that want to find out if they can arrest you for something you said. That's who these people are in verse 41. The Jews, the religious leaders, therefore were grumbling about him because he said, I am the bread that came out of heaven. And they were saying, is it not this Jesus, the son of Joseph, whose father and mother we know? How does he now say, I have come down out of heaven? And Jesus answered and said to them, do not grumble among yourselves, right? He's reading their mind already, and they're going to respond to them. Not everybody that comes to me, verse 44, no one can come to me unless the Father has sent them and draws him, and I will raise him up on the last day. That's interesting. It is written in the prophets, and they shall all be taught of God. Everyone who has heard and learned from the Father comes to me. Not that any man has seen the Father, except the one who is from the Father. He has seen the Father. This is Jesus. Truly, truly, I say to you, he who believes has eternal life. I am the bread of life. Your fathers ate manna in the wilderness, and they died. This is the bread which comes down out of heaven, so that one may eat of it and not die. I am the living bread that came out of heaven. If anyone eats of this bread, he shall live forever. The bread also which I give is for the life of the... I'll repeat that. And the bread also which I shall give for the life of the world is my flesh. We are familiar with this with communion, right? My blood and my flesh. And he said this even before that event. So, he's saying this to the Jews, the religious leaders, and they're getting more and more upset. The Jews therefore began to argue with one another, saying, how can this man give us his own flesh to eat? And now he goes into a portion about communion. Jesus therefore said to them, truly, truly, I say to you, unless you eat of the flesh of the Son of Man and drink his blood, you will have no life in yourselves. They're thinking about cannibalism. They're not understanding he's speaking metaphorically. He who eats my flesh and drinks my blood has eternal life, and I will raise him up on the last day. And my flesh is true food, and my blood is true drink. And he who eats my flesh and drinks my blood abides in me, and I in him. As the living Father sent me, I live because of the Father. So he who eats me, he shall live because of me. This is the bread which has come down out of heaven, not as the fathers ate and died. He who eats of this bread shall live forever. He's just trying to make his point over and over again. Verse 59. These things he said in the synagogue as he taught in Capernaum. So now we're given the context where he's giving this. He was actually in the synagogue in Capernaum when he's giving. The synagogue would be there, what we might consider a church. Verse 60. Many therefore of his disciples, when they heard this, said, this is a difficult statement. Who can listen to this? But Jesus, conscious that his disciples grumbled at this, said to them, does this cause you to stumble? What then if you shall behold the Son of Man ascending where he has gone before? What if you did see the Son of Man, Jesus, ascending to his place before? It is the Spirit who gives life. The flesh profits nothing. The words which I have spoken to you are spirit and are life. But there are some of you who do not believe. He's talking to his disciples. I think he might be referring to Judas here. Jesus knew from the beginning who they were that did not believe and who it was that would betray him. Verse 65. And he was saying, for this reason I have said to you that no one can come to me unless it has been granted him from the Father. As a result of these, many of the disciples withdrew and were not walking with him anymore. So we are thinking of 12 disciples. Yes, he had 12 full-time named disciples, but he had others following. There's more than 12 in many of these events. And we're told here at this time now, because of what his statements said and the difficulty of that, some withdrew and stopped following. But the 12 continued. Even Judas did. Verse 67, Jesus said therefore to the 12, do you want to go away also? 68, Simon Peter answered and said to him, Lord, to whom shall we go? You have the words of eternal life, and we have believed and have come to know that you are the Holy One of God. Jesus answered them, did I not myself choose you, the 12? Yet one of you is the devil. It's talking about Judas. Now he meant Judas, the son of Simon Iscariot, for he, one of the 12, was going to betray him. And this is how chapter 6 ends, with Peter's confession of his deity and his faith in him, and a looking to the future to know that Jesus already knew who was going to betray him. Okay, see you next time.